Meeting of the Board of Directors of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. We have a quorum that is present, and we'll begin. Our opening item is to approve the agenda. Can I have somebody move that into the record this evening?
Moved.
Roger, seconded by Ryan. We'll go down the list. Any changes or anything else to the agenda? Well, then we'll call the roll for approval. Mike?
Yes.
Rich? This one, that's a yes, Rich? Still can't hear you, Rich. Just nod your head. I'll take that as a yes. All right. Sue, we just got
Yes.
started.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes, so that is moved into the record. Item 1.2 is public comment. If you are wanting to address the board this evening, you can click the raise your hand icon, or I think it's *9 to let Mr. Book know that you want to address the board this evening. You will have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record. So, Mr. Book, do we have anybody who wants to address the board this evening?
Thank you, Chairman Mahler. We do, and we'll also start with an email that was received via my email. It's in regard to public comment on 2021 service restoration and impacts to food access. This was sent from, one moment, I want to make sure I tried to pronounce the name correctly. Sharadaya. The last name is D-A-Y-A. If I have mispronounced that, my apologies. It reads, Dear Board of Directors, the Washtenaw County Food Policy Council encourages the AAATA to prioritize equitable food access in decision-making as AAATA restores services and develops the August 2021 Service Restoration Plan. Given high rates of food insecurity in our community due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we emphasize the following to help ensure that our county's most vulnerable residents who rely on public transportation do not experience additional hardship with regards to food access. The bullet points are: fixed service routes to major grocery stores must be restored. We recommend that AAATA restore transportation to food access sites beyond major grocery stores, such as farmers markets, food pantries, and free meal programs. The use of TheRide to replace certain fixed routes may impact low-income residents' ability to access food sites due to reduced hours of operations, frequency of services, and delays to same-day service compared with standard fixed route transportation. Lastly, we continue to support grocery ride service and recommend that any service restoration plan ensures that our most vulnerable neighbors, including seniors, people with disabilities, non-English speakers, and low-income residents, have equitable access to food sites via public transit. We look forward to providing more specific feedback as the August 2021 restoration plan becomes publicly available and open for comment. Sincerely, Washtenaw County Food Policy Council, Washtenaw County Food Policy Council Food Access, and Nutrition Policy Action Team. That is the end of that email. Now I can move on to any raised hands we may have.
Okay.
The first is, yes, the first is Robert Pulowski.
Can you guys hear me at all?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you so much. I wanted to wish you guys a happy new year and any New Year's resolutions for the system. I'm looking forward to some new future changes or some sort of like that. I'm looking forward to it. I was in the meeting last month and I rewatched it. Yes, some audio came out. I do apologize for that. The last time I was here, I mentioned if you guys had even future plans to connect Smart with your guys' system. And then I also mentioned FlexRide when it started to cut out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off where I did the last meeting, was FlexRide. Great job on that. Smart's in the works of trying to get that together April of 2021. Congrats on that. FlexRide. Would it be possible in the future of this year to expand it to parts of Western Wayne County, like Wayne, Michigan, Belleville, Michigan, Canton, some areas around Metro Airport, Romulus, downtown Romulus, stuff like that? If you guys could talk to the city and possibly get them on board to have them vote on it next election. I'd love to see that. And also, since you guys are running FlexRide throughout parts of Ypsilanti Township, right down by the Ronsonville plant, Detroit Greenfield RV Park off Bunton Road. Would you guys, if anybody was riding your guys' system coming from that campground, how would you guys drop off passengers? Would you drop them off at the front where the gate is, or if they had a campground pass, would you guys possibly drop them off inside the campground? Besides that, on the FlexRide subject, I got some more comments. Do you guys have a new app in place besides Transit and Move It you guys are using? Do you guys have a separate app or a new app in place for your guys' system for people to use? Also, would you guys possibly consider start running Route 46 here on River Textile again? I use that route when I'm coming from the Detroit Greenfield RV Park. I use that route to get into Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor when I'm using that campground for the weekend or the week. I use that route a lot when I'm over there. And also, the Briarwood Mall bus stop where the shelter is, I noticed there's no buses going over there. I know there's Ellsworth running through the outer line on Briarwood Circle, and then it doesn't even go to the shelter. Would you guys consider having, when you guys get some routes back in place, or just that route in general, could you guys get the buses going back to that shelter to make it easier for anyone, people that don't want to walk far, ADA passengers? It would be great to have the buses go back to that shelter so they wouldn't have to walk halfway across the parking lot like they do in Roseville at Macomb Mall right off Gratiot, where they have to walk halfway across the parking lot from the mall entrance to the shelter. But those are my 3 questions on that. And then I've got one last question about your guys' new bus fleet, the Nova buses. I'm not really a big fan of those Nova buses because it limits passengers. Everybody's got to sit in the back. Everybody literally has to sit in the back because, you've got the ADA passenger seating on the left, and then you've got the strollers, and then you've got like the section where you have people with strollers that have to sit there. You got people with strollers that, that is dedicated for them, for people that have carts or strollers or whatever. There's limited seating on those buses, and I've never been a big fan of them. But, it's always good to give them a try to see how it is. I just wanted to make some comments on those. And as well, have you guys started running those? Have you guys started running that fleet yet? Have you guys started getting that fleet on the road yet? Or are you guys still using the old Gillig buses that you guys are using now? Those are my comments. I'm looking forward to see major changes with this system this year. It's a brand new year. So hopefully you guys got some resolutions for future plans of this system, and I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it completely. I mean, you guys are doing really well in the way of making changes for this system. I do apologize that my audio cut out last meeting, and I finally got everything that I needed to say out this meeting, which is great. Looking forward to new future plans with you guys, future changes. I'm looking forward to it, and you guys have a happy new year, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else, Keith?
Yes, you do, Mr. Chairman. We have Mr. Jim Mogensen. Mr. Mogensen, you've been unmuted.
Yes. So So you got the letter from the Food Policy Council, thus demonstrating that public transit is not the only thing I'm involved with. You will probably figure this out because I did send a question to Mr. Smith about the status of Grocery Ride. I didn't write the letter, but I was involved in the writing of the letter. So just so that's out there. The other thing that happened as part of that was that I sent Mr. Smith a link to the Watts Human Services Public Transit Coordination Plan that was created by Watts first in 2016 and then updated in 2018. The staff person who did that report has now moved on into the private sector. But that Watts thing, it's very specific to Washtenaw County, and it provides I believe, a good information about the various impacts for people with seniors and disabilities and people with some limited mobility. So I encourage it. At yesterday's Watts policy meeting, I learned that the RTA has created a regional human services coordination plan. And when I went to go to the website at the RTA, I discovered they had a meeting, which I attended. I attended the board meeting this afternoon, and so I'm in contact with them. And but I just bring up the Watts Human Services Coordinator because it's more specific to the AATA's service area. And the RTA Human Services Coordination Plan is more of a transportation planning style document. So as always, thank you very much for your time and attention. And I will try to get my thoughts together and speak at the end of the meeting as well. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Keith, do we have anybody else?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. No other speakers. We'll close the public comment period, move on to general announcements. Does anybody from the board or the staff have any general announcements this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chair, John Metzinger does.
Go ahead, John.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. At the CEO's request, I wanted to bring some information to the board tonight about federal funding. Last month, Congress passed additional coronavirus relief funding, which included money for public transportation. So the good news is that we are expecting more federal funding as aid for the pandemic. Staff are working to unpack more information about what this means and how much we're talking about. So we'll be bringing forward more details soon to the board and to the public. But meanwhile, we would like to thank our U.S. congressional delegation for their support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sue?
Thanks, Eric. I just wanted to let board members know that before the holiday, the university released a document in draft form, the President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality. And it's being pretty widely circulated. The city had a representative participating on that. And I bring it up because there's some references to transit, to remote parking, to other mobility initiatives, electric vehicles, the use of dedicated bike lanes, things that our board members or perhaps listeners would be interested in reading. There's a portal available for public comments. So anyone is invited to give comments on the document. I just want to stress it is a draft, so it is nothing that's approved yet, but certainly available if folks are interested in reviewing it and offering their opinions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, quick response to Mr. Pulowski, excuse me. He had a number of questions and we would be happy to answer them. I confess I couldn't quite keep up with the notes. If you'd like to visit our website, under the leadership column, there is a web form where he can submit any question that he would like at any length that he would like, and we will respond to him about all of the details that he asked through other channels. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, it's not a general announcement, but just wanted everybody to know that I did meet with the CEO last Friday, and we did go over the CEO evaluations. So thank you, everybody, for turning those in, and that process is now complete. So thank you, everybody, for your participation feedback in that process. Any other general announcements? All right, we'll move on to section 2, the consent agenda. We have minutes from the previous meeting, committee meeting reports, and then the fiscal year 2022 state application resolution. Those are all as part of the consent agenda. Can I have somebody move the consent agenda into the record? Roger, seconded by Jesse. All right, we'll go down the list. Let's say yes or no for your approval. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also yes, so that's moved into the record. Thank you. So move on to section 3, policy monitoring and development. 3.1 is committee meeting discussion. Any questions or discussion items anybody wanted to bring up about what was in the committee meeting notes in the minutes that we just passed into the record? Kathleen?
I actually just have one correction, actually. I didn't know how to do that beforehand. Under the service committee, Mr. Carpenter was present, but he's not listed under staff present.
Got it. I'm sure Mr. Carpenter will be taking that up with whoever fixed those notes. For missing the fact that the CEO is there. All right,
I
thank you.
get that a lot, actually. That's pretty common. So
There's a good book on executive presence I can give you for that. You can.
I've heard that. Yeah.
On that. Yeah. Okay. Item 3.2 then is a board retreat update. So we've got the dates fixed. Just that's the morning of February 12th and March 3rd. So those should be fixed and on your calendar now. We'll of course be doing those remotely. I did solicit or tried to solicit ideas from board members. Didn't get a lot of feedback, not much. And we will try to incorporate as many ideas that we can in terms of the feedback we did get for topics. The approach at this point will be to let the staff, Matt lead the staff in explaining their long-term process and substance of their planning, and then generally have the board react to it. Matt and I had a discussion about that, and they will come up with kind of a strategic vision and spend a good part of the first session on this on February 12th, discussing the staff's ideas for long-term vision and planning, and give the board something to react to. Among the topics we talked about were, process, substance, resources, millage, mode sharing, capital projects, regionalism, ridership versus coverage, timing, and things like that. I want to give the staff a wide latitude to present their vision to us and have the board react to that. So please come ready with your ideas about what you would like to see. And it's not too late if you have certain other ideas that you didn't get around to letting me know before. Please give me an email with those ideas, and I'll make sure those get into Matt's hands to lead that retreat. And then I think the second day hopefully will be mostly brainstorming what and reshaping that. We don't expect to have the next 5-year or 10-year plan worked out in one retreat, but we do expect to at least have a good idea of where we're going to head and the process that will hopefully take to get us there. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll get some timing down and some general guidelines about when we would like to see the process fully completed in terms of its development. So that's the board retreat plan at this point. Any questions or comments or other topics that people want to debate and discuss right now about the board retreat. Okay. Not seeing any. We'll move on then to the 3.3, the LAC Task Force report. And I will turn it over to Kathleen to report out to the board. So Kathleen, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mahler. I just wanted to give you a quick update. The task force did meet in December. We reviewed all the excellent recommendations from our policy governance coach, Rose Bercier. And then based on those recommendations, we came up with some ideas of how we would like to proceed in terms of policy language and whatnot. And that will be presented to the governance committee, I believe, at the end of this month. And then from there, I believe that if there's nothing further to do, then they'll bring the recommendation to the board. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Any questions on LAC Task Force process? Okay. We'll move on then to our monitoring report, which is policy 2.0, and we'll turn it over to Matt to discuss or lead us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So monitoring report for your consideration and hopefully acceptance this evening. It is policy 2.0, which is actually the global executive constraint. This is the highest level executive limitation policy. It's ironically the briefest as well, only a few lines. A couple things were different this time. So we did submit the monitoring report. All of you filled out the survey. Thank you very much. After that, or as part of that survey, one of the board members brought to my attention that there were some inconsistencies between the monitoring report and what was on our website. And he was absolutely correct. So there were errors of fact in the monitoring report. So the monitoring report that you have in your packet has red strike through, or excuse me, sort of track changes language where I have gone back and fixed the errors. So thank you to Raymond. He's very diligent and he caught the right things. I'll never sneak anything past him. So that's good. That's good. Really, it came down to, sort of the timing and completeness of some of the other monitoring reports that were done over the last year, and I accept full responsibility for the errors. A little short-handed, missing Rosa Maria, who's off on maternity leave right now, and just in the flurry of the holidays, some of the details got away from me. So entirely my fault. So we had good responses to it, and I just want to touch on, I think, some of the more important ones. Several of the monitoring reports were delayed over the last year, and a couple of them were not submitted at all. This was, as outlined in the report, due to the pandemic. During discussions with one of the committees about this report, question was raised, did we authorize the delays or submissions or deferrals, I should say. No, there really weren't specific actions taken. It was sort of, as we all rolled through the early days of the pandemic, we sort of made the decision that staff could delay some of these things if they needed to, if their time and energy was better spent addressing the pandemic. And so we did that. It did sort of happen in a somewhat ad hoc fashion, however, so it wasn't pre-approved, so that is true. We also did change the schedule. You may recall in November that we presented to you sort of a rebooting of the monitoring schedule, and you did accept that, and that had the unintended effect of moving some of these monitoring reports around, so we apologize for any confusion that may have caused. And then I think perhaps the most substantive part of this, which really I think speaks to your willingness to accept this report this evening, good questions came up both individually and in committees about the CEO's interpretation. And I think they're very legitimate ones and absolutely ones that we could discuss if you'd like. So the policy reads that the CEO shall not cause, allow, or fail to address any practice, activity, decision, or organizational circumstance that is either unlawful, imprudent, or in violation of commonly accepted business practices or professional ethics. And my interpretation is a very strict and narrow one, which comes down to basically you've said what you meant by all of that in your other policies, and if I've submitted those and you've accepted them, I am therefore compliant. That's a very narrow interpretation, and it's one that has changed over the years. I have struggled to provide evidence, for example, that I haven't broken a law. And you may recall that the previous set of interpretations, I attempted to say evidence of that would be that we haven't been charged or found guilty of a crime or breaking a law. And that at the time seemed very unsatisfying. Got even murkier when we got into prudency, business practices, and ethics, even harder to nail down there. And so we sort of fell back on this interpretation. Good questions were raised by board members, and we may want to discuss them this evening. I think they're very legitimate about whether this interpretation is entirely satisfying to the board. You do have the option to say, thank you very much, Mr. CEO, that interpretation doesn't quite cut it. Can you please try again? That's entirely within your purview and would not be taken personally at all, I want to assure you. This is just something that it's been a struggle to really nail down, and any advice would also be eagerly accepted. If you do accept it, I will probably go to Rose Mercier and ask her how I do a better job next time. If you don't accept it, I will probably go to Rose Mercier and ask her how I do a better job this time. So either way, all roads lead to Rose Mercier. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to turn it back to you. And if there are any questions or discussion, I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions or comments, discussion items for the board, or questions for Matt regarding his interpretation, comments, or the issue brief itself, the monitoring report? Okay. Anybody? Raymond, then Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I apologize to Matt and his team. I was working through the holidays and spent a little bit more time parsing through some of this than perhaps I typically have time for. So I just got my wheels turning a little bit. Again, I think, we are fortunate. We often praise Matt and the very capable team at TheRide and the AAATA, and we're very fortunate to have the team that we have. All I was just speculating about is, if you look at what the global end statement talks about, is really, that we're following the law, we're acting ethically. But when you look at kind of the bullets underneath it, there doesn't seem to be a reporting mechanism back up to that, right? And while I agree with Matt wholeheartedly that a sort of self-affirmation maybe isn't very necessary, all I was really wondering is if someone on the team were found guilty of breaking the law, how would the board be informed of it? Because it's not clear to me in the reporting structure how that would come back to the board. And if it's not explicit, does it need to be? And really all I was looking for, from Matt or staff is, if something were to happen, what would be the mechanism by which we would be informed? Would it be through this monitoring report? Would it be through some other mechanism? Again, my hope is that it never comes to that. I'm hopeful and confident that it won't any time. But do we just know as a board if something were to happen, how would we find out about it? And so that's all I was trying to go through, is just kind of a hypothetical, again, not because I have any specific concern on the issue, but just, if the issue were to arise, how would it be handled?
I know we do have policy.
Oh, I'm sorry. And for what it's worth, I'm happy to accept the report today. I could even move as such, because this issue isn't keeping me up at night. It's just something I was thinking through in the hypothetical.
I don't have my manual open in front of me. It's up on my shelf here, but we do have policies that speak to the CEO, shall not allow the board to go uninformed about major developments, nor will he allow us to be surprised. So to the extent that there's a reporting mechanism, we could hold the CEO accountable for not reporting to us that somebody's going to jail for embezzling funds. That he is tasked with that. So, and he can't pardon himself as an excuse for, not reporting that. So that applies to him as well as members of his staff. So maybe Matt, I don't know if you have off the top of your head what number those policies are that you could speak to, but I think, we do have a kind of a mechanism that binds him to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your memory is very good. We do have a policy. Policy 2, I believe it's now number 210.12. It was previously 211.12. That requires me to inform you of any anticipated or actual non-compliance, regardless of the monitoring schedule. So if I'm required to comply with the law and I become aware that we have not complied with the law, I would be obligated under that policy to make you aware, probably in the most reasonable time. I haven't looked at that interpretation recently. I think I say, I'm not going to tell you every traffic ticket we might get, but if there's a serious issue of legal guilt, then I am obligated to inform you.
Thank you. I think, Mike, you had something? You had your hand up?
Yes, I just want to make a very brief comment and express my sympathy for Matt on how difficult this is. I mean, these are in general, you shall not do this, you shall not do that. And it's really hard to prove a negative. And so, I mean, Matt has really taken on a very difficult task to do that. And I compliment him for the job that he's doing. But I just wanted to say it's really difficult.
Thank you. Anybody else? Roger?
Yeah, I guess somewhat echoing what Mike is saying, when you look at the policy, the first part of the policy, unlawful, certainly you can define, but imprudent or in violation of commonly accepted business practices or professional ethics, how do you prove you're not being imprudent? And what are commonly accepted business practices or professional ethics? I mean, providing proof for that seems very difficult, if not impossible. So I would be interested to see what Rose Mercier has to say about that. Whether she would suggest any changes, so it's much more clear how Matt would be able to provide evidence that he's obeying that policy.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this debate before, and when we put, we chose these words very carefully at the beginning when we adopted policy governance, and not without some strenuous debate about each and every one of these descriptors. And I think we adopted this knowing that it would be stressful for the staff, for Matt in particular, to provide that. However, I think we went forward with it based on the fact that these convey certain values that are important to the organization. And even if they are murky to say, yeah, I wasn't imprudent, a double negative, it's more that, we felt that it was necessary to put on the record for ourselves and the public and for everybody who's going to come after us to govern and run this organization, that these values are the values we had at the time, and we want those values to continue. So yeah, it's a little stressful, but that's why, Matt gets the big bucks, and, we have to believe him there. So I think we recognized it when we did it, I think. But yeah, if Rose has other suggestions about how to comply with this or show some evidence of that, happy to do it. But like Raymond, I'm not going to lose total sleep over it just because you say, hey, I can't prove a negative. I mean, the sense, it's just don't do anything crazy, stupid, illegal, or embarrassing. That's what I've said over and over again. That's really what it means, right? Just don't be a knucklehead. I think Jesse had a hand up, and then Kathleen.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to something I brought up during the committee meeting, particularly with the, and I guess it deals with the schedule for the reports. Now, Matt, I believe you said that this is supposed to cover the fiscal year of spanning 2019 to 2020. Maybe I'll get to what my concern is, particularly the treatment of staff, though I think it would also affect the ends focus of grants if that were still a policy. That those are two policies that will have gone an entire calendar year without seeing a report. So during the committee meeting, Matt, explained that we had changed the reporting for treatment of staff, that's been pushed off until June, I think. I can't remember the exact month, but the fact that an entire calendar year will have elapsed since that policy was monitored, that says to me that the next time you put, if not this report, then the next report is going to have to say that that report was not submitted. If you can see what I'm getting at, that either that or the report is going to be counted twice. So I'm wondering what's happening with treatment of staff. And also, and there might be other policies here that would fall into that that area. Not since I don't know what time span is being included here. And I see that you have policies from December 19 through September 2020, where you have reports for that time period. If you could please speak to that.
Sure. Our general practice, now that we've gone a couple of years of monitoring reports, is that the latest monitoring report refers back to as far back as the time of the last one. So when I give you the treatment of staff in June, it will not just be 12 months, it will push probably into 16 or 18 months to compensate for that change in the schedule. So we're not going to have a gap of unmonitored time, if that's your question. And I think, as I mentioned in the committee, we did, a big part of the treatment of staff monitoring report is to ask staff how they feel they're being treated. And that has come through a employer survey, an anonymous online survey. And we did conduct that survey. I want to say maybe October. It's been a few months now, and every month the last year has been a decade. So forgive me for losing the time. But we did conduct that survey. We do have the results. They are going to be a part of the next treatment of staff monitoring report, which will not leave any time period unmonitored. I think the challenge with many of these monitoring reports is that in many respects, they can only show a snapshot in time, how people felt when that survey was being done. People may feel very differently by the time you get the monitoring report submitted. So that's one challenge we always have. But I hope that provides some clarity about our intentions for the monitoring schedule.
So does this report also kind of follow that it covers the time period since it was last, since 2.0 was last monitored?
I believe so. I don't have the schedule immediately in front of me, but that's been our general practice.
So I guess what I'm wondering, you don't happen to know what time, when 2.0 was last monitored, do you?
If you give me just a moment.
I'm just wondering, again, if for instance, if it was monitored in January of last year, then the treatment of the statement that the treatment of staff was turned in on time wouldn't apply because it's not covered in this particular in this particular span of time.
So our previous schedule had this scheduled for October. And without checking the website, I assume we did present it to you in October of 2019. The monitoring report you have in front of you now goes from October 2019 to December of 2020. So it didn't seem to leave a gap from them.
Okay.
And if I recall, the challenge with the treatment of staff, the treatment of staff was delayed, I think, in part because of the pandemic and not wanting to ask staff, how do you think things are going? Maybe at the lowest possible moment, but putting a little bit of space in between that and letting things calm down a little bit. It's frankly it's been a while. I don't recall exactly why, but I think that was part of the logic. And then with the calendaring that you approved, that pushed it into June. But you will get the report.
Right. I understand that. I just want to, again, I don't, my concern is that a report would be counted twice. But it sounds like since it's been over a calendar year since we've received a report on this particular policy, that would explain, that I guess that timing does make sense to me. If the last time this was submitted was October of 2019. So I think that answers my question. So thank you.
Kathleen, I think you had a hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I understand the concerns that everyone has raised. And one of the things, I wasn't there when we went to policy governance and when these policies were adopted, but I do appreciate the language. I appreciate the language that we include, that shall not do anything imprudent and all of that. And I understand that those things may be difficult to prove, but I can't help but hear Rose Mercier in my head. I've had the pleasure of seeing her in a couple conferences. And then of course she's been to several committee meetings and board meetings. And one of the things she always stresses is that it's up to the CEO to interpret, and it should not always be our first consideration to write a policy to make it easier for the CEO to interpret. That interpretation is on the CEO, not on us, and that we're the ones who are guiding what our principles are. And I think that we're asking him to be imprudent, and the other issues, the things that are hard to prove, I still think that they're important. So I just kind of wanted to share my thoughts on that. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anybody else on 2.0 monitoring report? Questions, items? No? Okay. Then I think we have to make a decision about whether or not to adopt what we have here. Can I have somebody, well, we have a couple of different options, as we always do. We could say it's fully in compliance, except for the items noted. Making reasonable progress toward compliance, not in compliance, or cannot be determined. So can I have somebody make a motion about which level we should adopt this at? Roger?
I would recommend that we compliance with our policy with except for the items noted.
Second.
Second by Sue. We'll call the vote then. If you support level B in compliance except for items noted. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also yes. So that passes at level B unanimously. Thank you, everybody. The next one on our agenda is 3.5, the board disclosure statements, which are due. This speaks to policy 3321. And on page 38 of our packet, you'll see the certificate of disclosure, certification of disclosure of financial or personal interest. You should have gotten something from the staff in the not too distant past about your financial conflicts or potential ones there. And there's a certificate there that says by signing below, I acknowledge that, et cetera, et cetera. That's on page 40 of the packet. Any discussion or questions about the disclosure that's in the packet? Then we'll ask you to, when the meeting is over, please sign and return that to the staff. I think the instructions are on page 39 of the packet. And please follow up with that. Return it to Michelle Whitlow at your earliest convenience. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if
I had a question about that, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see or hear anybody. Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, I'm sorry if I spoke over anyone.
No.
I was curious if it was possible for staff to provide a copy that's able to be signed digitally.
It certainly is. And maybe John can correct me. I think you've all already signed it.
Yes.
Is this the same one we've already signed?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Was there anything else to discuss then?
And we signed it digitally too.
Yeah.
I must need more caffeine. Forgive me, everyone.
No, it's my mistake. I thought this was something different. That's why it was on the agenda, but thank you. Okay, so I guess we've already taken care of that item.
I guess I'd like to know what the response was. Are we still missing some? Do we know how many got submitted?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We are pleased to let the board know that all board members have completed this disclosure. So we have those on file and they're available for inspection if anyone would like to have a look.
Great.
All right. Any other questions on that? All right, if not, we'll move on to the audit update and we'll turn this back over to staff. I'm not sure who's going to take this for us. Is that going to be John or somebody else? Latasha or?
I'm going to talk about it, I think.
Oh, Kyra's going to talk about it. Okay.
John might jump in. So the audit task force met at the beginning of December for kind of a preliminary kickoff meeting with our auditors at UHY. Sue and Kathleen are also on the task force with me and the finance team. So it was just an introductory meeting. We meet again in February to go over the preliminary findings of the auditors. And then I believe their report is going to be submitted to the full board at the February board meeting. I did part of the audit process, aside from working with staff, is to also conduct an interview with a member of the board. And that's happened, I believe, the past 3 years. And I did that last year and again this year with Ilka from UHY about a month ago. So that all went well. I don't think there will be any findings from that interview in our report. And that's all. There's not really anything substantive to discuss at this time because we haven't gotten the report yet. But February will be the time where we review that in detail.
Thank you. Any questions on the audit? The cat looks so comfortable back there.
That is a dog. That is my French bulldog. He would be very offended to be called a cat.
Definitely looks like a cat.
Well, all I can tell you is my 68-pound pit bull would think that's a cat and probably treat it accordingly.
It's time for classes.
What's that?
Might be time for classes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll be thematic and say that I just got a new puppy and she's
Aw.
winning, which is why I don't have my camera on because she's yelping and nibbling. So,
Now that I could tell is a dog.
anyway, sorry my camera's off, but she would definitely distract the whole rest of the meeting.
No problem.
That's a golden retriever, Sue?
Yeah, she just turned 11 weeks. We got her a couple weeks ago. So
This
she's
is
a
gonna be my.
handful.
Sorry. I was just gonna say this is my favorite part of the minutes for next meeting.
I guess I'll say that this part of the meeting was rough.
Well, that's a good one.
Let's not put that in the minutes. How about that?
You got it, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay, moving on then to section 4 on that note. 4.1, the service restoration plan, and we'll turn it back over to Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been talking about this for a couple of months. One innovation at board request is we're going to start labeling repeated issue briefs as not having changed if nothing's changed, so you don't need to read them again. As we started this discussion in November, staff brought forward a timetable and general plan for the restoration of services, complete with full public involvement. And we told you, I think in November, that we had a few months to discuss it, but I needed to give staff the go-ahead in January so they can begin that process. So in parallel to discussions with you, to make sure no one had concerns, staff have continued to work, and they are on the cusp of being ready to come out for public comment and for your consideration or feedback with specifics. We don't have them tonight, but this is the last time. I just wanted to give you guys the courtesy, an opportunity to tell me if you wanted me to pump the brakes. Otherwise, staff are going to move forward for restoring most of our services in August of this year. We've been discussing it now for 3 months. No real game changer has occurred that would make that plan more risky. There are still risks, particularly to state funding. But I think the biggest thing that's happened in the intervening time has been the election of Joe Biden and the passage of additional stimulus funding. As John mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we know that we will be getting more federal stimulus, relief funding. So that actually improves our financial position and makes it probably easier and less risky for us to move forward with the service restoration. We don't know what other things may happen in the future, but if something changes to negative, we can always change course later at that time if needed. But we're feeling pretty solvent and confident at the moment. So unless there are any final questions or concerns raised by the board tonight, tomorrow I will give the staff direction to proceed with that restoration and the public involvement and revealing the detailed plan. So I wanted to give you guys one last opportunity to ask questions or raise concerns.
Any last minute concerns or questions for Matt about service restoration plan? Mike?
I'm just curious as to what the plan is regarding public involvement.
Sure, perhaps Mr. Yang can provide an overview of how we're going to approach public involvement.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Right now, we have a proposed plan. By late February, we're going to communicate the details to board members, and then we'll be to all the key stakeholders, authority members and POSA members and universities and other DDA. And then we'll set up some meetings, walk through some details with key stakeholders.
answer questions they may have and can receive feedback. And then by beginning of March, we're going to do a public release. And then all the detailed information will be available for public to review. And then late in March, we're going to conduct all the public town halls. So of course, people can participate, ask questions, and then we can receive feedback. So by beginning of April, so we're going to close the public feedback sessions. And then we go back and take this feedback and incorporate into the final plan. But in June, we still have a plan to go out for the recommended change for public feedback or stakeholder feedback. So by end of June, that's going to be cut-off time. I mean, there's no final change anymore. So that's the general process for public and the stakeholder feedback.
Thank you, Forrest. The main reason I asked that is because that's not filled out on the Gantt chart, that line.
Would it be helpful, Mike, if that was added?
I would say definitely.
Okay. Any other questions about service restoration?
Actually, the line item is there, but it's not filled in.
Right.
That, I think, might get to two things. One, the Gantt chart, isn't that part of the long range plan? So just want to point that out. And actually, we had a discussion about this in the, since it may come up when we discuss the long range plan, that line public input is actually a header for the items below it, which is why it's not filled out on the chart. But that's also, I think, our next item.
Now that I look more carefully, Jesse, you are, of course, correct.
I could only say that because we had the same conversation. In our, Mr. Chair, if you'll pardon me, because I did have my hand up, and my question was pretty much the same as Mike's. Is I wanted to know what the plan, what the schedule was for public engagement on in preparation for the service restoration, and happy to have that answered. Thank you.
Okay. Kathleen?
Mine isn't a question so much as a comment. I just want to say thank you to Forrest that you're conducting 2 rounds of public comment and public engagement. I think it's really important that the public gets a chance to give feedback initially and then see what it is that you're proposing and then give feedback again. So I'm really excited and thankful.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, if not, we'll move on then to long range plan process. And back to Mr. Carpenter for his input and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're a busy organization, and we do have at least two planning processes sort of rolling forward simultaneously. So I just want to take a moment and distinguish them. What we just talked about, this is mostly for anyone who may be watching this video. What we just discussed was the restoration of normal services. And so that's getting back, sort of out of the pandemic withdrawal of service and putting things back, sort of getting back to normal. And so that's now going to roll forward for this August. What we're talking about now, and starts on page 46 of the packet, is our proposed process for how the board, the public, stakeholders will all be involved in long-range planning for services and programs. So this is what we provide, and it's a bit more of a long-range perspective. So very quickly, we're interested in your feedback from you, from any members of the public, but certainly from the board. And really on page 47, you see outlining of some of the key steps involved. We're already doing quite a bit on the back end to get ready for this. It'll start in the next couple of months with board retreats. And that's really where we, as a group, start to dig into what's the future of our programs and services. And I know this is a subject that we've all wanted to discuss together for some time, so I really do appreciate everyone's patience here. After that, we get into some public feedback, probably a little bit earlier this year, but mostly in the fall and then later. Then we move expeditiously, I should say, to trying to get clarity about the long-range plan. And we've sort of set the long-range time horizon as 2045. So it's sort of a 24-year time scale. Our intent, if you look at page 48, you'll see a Gantt chart, the same one that has confused several board members. So I apologize. We're gonna clean that up in the formatting next time. We're really driving to get a long-term vision plan sort of nailed down by March of 2022. Now, Roger in the service committee rightly noted that there is a challenge here. We are going to get a little jammed up on the back end, so I say, in 2022. We're going to still be putting the finishing touches on this long-range plan, while initial planning is going to have to start going on for the millage that needs to occur in August of 2022. So at that point, and you'll see that with the brownish orange lines at the bottom of the Gantt chart, we are going to have two discussions, again, going in parallel at that time, but we think that's manageable. And hopefully by that point of the long range planning process, what we're going to be able to do with the 2022 millage and want to do, that should be clear, hopefully long before that. So I don't anticipate too many problems. So there is a little bit of a risk on the back end, but it is an aggressive timeline, but we're confident that we can make it. So with that, I just wanted to bring this forward, see if there's any feedback or advice, but also as a way of letting the general public know that this process is coming forward. So with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on the materials or discussion about what Matt just reported out? Long range survey. Okay, Jesse?
There were a couple of items from the notes in the regarding this discussion from the Finance Committee that I was hoping could be elaborated a little bit. One was the hiring of a consultant to lead the project. I was wondering if we could hear a bit more detail on that.
Sure, and maybe just a high level, and then Forrest can pick up any detailed questions. I wouldn't say they're leading the process. Staff are leading the consultants. Consultants are being brought on to supplement staff resources. So you hire consultants when you need additional manpower, as they used to say, you just don't have enough horses, or you need specialized skills that you don't need every day, but you need once every 10 years. In this case, we're hiring consultants because we genuinely could use a little bit of both, but the consultants will be led by Forrest. And if that doesn't answer your question, please drill deeper.
Sure. I mean, I very much support the hiring of consultants. I think this is a perfect place to hire people with specific industry expertise who can focus, since all of our executive staff, not to say they're not eminently qualified experts themselves, but you also have a lot to be paying attention to in addition to the long range plans. So I think the idea of hiring a consultant who can dedicate focused energy on this is an excellent idea. I was just saying, going from the notes that the quote was that the consultant who will essentially lead the project with involvement from staff. I wanted that kind of clarified. So with that said, at what point will the consultant be hired, and should we be expecting reports from the consultant, or will everything be filtered through staff?
You may see and hear from the consultants. It will be coming through staff. They report to Forrest, and Forrest may deliver the information himself or feel that it's best you hear it from them. Kind of go on a case-by-case basis. And I think he's on the verge of hiring them, unless I am mistaken. Forrest, do you want to elaborate?
Sure. We're in the process. We have a proposal to review right now. Probably next couple of weeks, so we'll have a final decision. But as soon they're gonna, I look at some approach they proposed, and there will be some direct communication to board members. Maybe have a one-on-one conversation. We're still finalizing the process, but certainly board members and key stakeholders and public and writers will have opportunities to get their feedback into the process.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Anybody else on the long-range plan process? Okay. Then we'll move on to 4.3, the CEO report. Back to Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm also, we've moved sort of expediently through the agenda, so thank you. I am going to ask Keith to reach out to our closed session participants and maybe ask them to get ready. I think we may be getting there an hour ahead of schedule, or roughly. So the CEO report, as it usually does, details sort of under the hood, management-oriented things that are going on. A couple of things I think really bear a note. Over the last month, it's really become apparent to me that staff need a breather. It's been 10 months of not only keeping the lights on, but also modernizing the agency. A lot of that work continues to go on without, frankly, bothering you with it. But the dealing with the pandemic was another major thing, and it's very apparent to me now that staff are pretty bushed, and so I need to cut them some slack. So I'm seeing signs of burnout and delayed material. I'm seeing errors that normally would not occur, and I really think that's on me, just kind of pushing maybe a bit too much. So I'm going to begin sort of slowing things down a little bit and giving staff some time to recuperate. This is important. You have policies that speak to the kind of workplace, the treatment of staff, and remaining a workplace of choice and the kind of place that people want to be. And driving people too hard is not consistent with that policy. The general level of anxiety for all of us in society over the last year, the ambient level has already been very high for political, economic, and public health reasons. So I am going to begin sort of slowing things down when we can. I will be asking for your patience. I may suggest some things possibly get deferred, but this really is all in the service of preserving our staff capacity, not running it too hard and burning it out or burning staff out. So I don't have, this was done sort of after some heart-to-heart conversations among the executive team. We all sort of saw this in ourselves as well as in other staff. And so it's time to sort of throttle down a little bit. So I want you to know that that's coming. We'll keep as many plates spinning as we can and focus on the most important things, the things that have deadlines that, like Forrest has really spoken well to me. There are certain deadlines we can't move, and those really become our priorities. So service restoration and things like that. So I wanted to let you know that's coming, and we will let you know. But you may hear more from me about, could we delay that? Would you mind if we give it an extra month just for the sake of preserving staff capacity? Other things, employee vaccination has begun. We are identified as essential workers because that's how the CDC has recommended it. Washtenaw County has agreed with that, and really keeping hospital staff having access to the jobs, people who have no other choice or opportunity, making sure they can get groceries, things like that. So that we're classed as essential workers, I think is correct and appropriate. So that does allow us to get into the queue, the line for vaccinations ahead of the general public. However, the availability of the vaccines, as you may have read in the news, has become a bit of a start-stop problem. Vaccine doses, there's just not enough to go around. So staff have been invited to make appointments. Office staff are trying to hold back a little so that our frontline staff can get in first. But the whole thing is being organized pretty much at an individual level. So we have no corporate control over how individual staff make their appointments. So it's just sort of happening as it happens. But I am glad that it is happening. We're taking some time to try to encourage staff to do it. We have decided that it should be a voluntary opportunity, at least initially. We know that a lot of staff have good reasons for having some hesitancy about any vaccine, let alone one that was developed quickly. So we want to give people an opportunity to get more comfortable with it and come around on their own. We are not, in the back of our minds, we do know there is sort of a operational continuity issue here. If a lot of staff don't get vaccinated, we could have a problem in the future. We're going to, frankly, wait and see if that problem actually emerges or if staff will voluntarily take it upon themselves. We've gotten some great resources. I got one today from the university, a very brief video targeted, frankly, to the African-American community with a great number of medical professionals from that community attesting to why the vaccine is safe and folks should take it. So we may be using that with our staff. So that's our approach to the vaccinations. The rest of the report, I think, is fairly self-explanatory, but I do want to thank Reggie Whitlow for his many years of service, another multi-decade retiree, and Reggie has been operations supervisor and I think is acting manager for a while until very recently. So we certainly do thank him for his years of service and dedication. Wish him well in his next opportunities. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on the CEO report? Anything that Matt discussed or any comments that he made?
Eric, I don't have a question, but maybe the board could just echo Matt's good wishes to Reggie. I saw Kathleen clapping, but I don't know if it gets in the minutes if you're clapping. So I thought maybe we could just have a statement because I agree. He is such a great ambassador. So my best to him, and I'm sure the board would agree, how grateful we are for his years of service and dedication. And thanks for sharing that information to allow us the opportunity to give him our best wishes.
Well, I think if the minutes can reflect that the chair mistook a French bulldog for a cat, they can reflect that Kathleen applauded for Reggie Whitlow. So we'll make sure that gets into the minutes. But yes, I think it would be most appropriate to acknowledge his service. What a great employee he's been for TheRide, and for staying through this pandemic and helping provide that continuity of leadership that's been there through this very difficult time. People like Reggie really were the glue that held this organization together for the last several months and many years prior to that. So thank you, Reggie. Thank you. I had one question, Matt, and that was about, I don't know if you talked about this, I don't think you did, but the transit orient development ordinance, what is the latest with that, and where are we fitting in with them now? How are we collaborating with the city at this point?
Sure. Forrest, would you like to speak to our work with the city today?
Sure. We actually we had a meeting with city staff, and then we got all their proposed staff report, and then proposed they call it T1 ordinance for this transit supported development. So Matt and I had a chance to review them and have feedback going back to the city staff. We're setting up another meeting, try to review our comments. Generally, I think we don't have a lot of concerns. I think the direction they're heading is kind of in line with our vision. But there are a couple of issues. I'm not gonna go into the details, but in general, I think the city staff are working with us, try to finalize the recommendation, and then possibly will invite us to the planning commission presentation so we can sit in and then give our support. So that's kind of where we are. Hopefully in the next week also, we can finalize our feedback and kind of a review and finalize their recommendation. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on the CEO report? Mike?
I just wanted to make a comment on Matt's initial point about staff capacity and the I'm sure very real concern with the staff becoming exhausted under these very difficult conditions. I'll just say personally, I do appreciate those comments. I give you all my support. I trust you in terms of making decisions that are the wise ones in terms of giving consideration to the staff and the fact that they are the most important asset that TheRide has. And I trust you very much in terms of keeping us informed about what actions you take, about cutting them some slack, as you said. And I think that's very appropriate. And I imagine other board members than just myself have been concerned, but not saying anything about this particular issue. And thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Then we'll move on to section 5. Any emergent business that didn't have a chance to make it onto agenda item that anybody wants to cover tonight? If not, we'll close that out, go to section 6, which is closing items. Topics for the next meeting, we have the board retreat coming up before our next general board meeting. So the retreat is February 12th again in the morning, and then our next February board meeting is February 18th, where we'll talk about the audit report, financial condition, policy 2.5, and then our monitoring report of 4.0 to 4.4. Any questions on those? Okay. Then we'll close that out and go to 6.2, back to public comment period. So I'll ask Keith, do we have anybody from the public who wants to address the board yet again this evening?
Thank you, Chairman Mahler. Yes, we do. We have Mr. Jim Mogensen. Mr. Mogensen, you've been unmuted.
Yes. So the first thing I wanted to bring up is the questions about the LAC, and probably back in November, I expressed concern about the ADA regulations, and Mr. Carpenter reached out to me. about knowing, and the thing that I was remembering as I went back to check was that the ADA requires the agencies to have an ongoing process for members of seniors and disabilities to have an ongoing participation in both the planning and operations. And somewhere deep in some advisory document saying, the FDA says they're not going to require authorities to have citizen advisory boards. So now I want to take what I just said, bookmark that for a minute. Then you have the question of the role of advisory boards in the policy governance model. I'm going to do that as a separate thing. And so there's a whole questions about how processing that. And the third thing I'll say in this is another separate is that the concern I was having back then was because there has been discussion of changing the paratransit, who qualifies for paratransit and being more ADA, going back to just doing what the ADA requires. My concern was those couple of things would come together at the same time as a change in paratransit. And I do not believe that people are trying to manipulate, but I am guessing that other people who haven't been following this as closely might come to different conclusions. So that's what I was concerned about, and I'll follow up later. Second thing relates to the RTA. When I was at the RTA this was it this afternoon? No, yeah. I talked about the 5311. That is the rural funding, section 5311. And part of that is the 5311 subpart F. And that is the stuff that funds the intercity, rural, Greyhound, Indian Trails. And there is some concern about what will happen with Michigan Flyer and how it applies. And it's complicated, but I just want to know I'm trying to do my best to get some of that, find some of that information. It's hard to find. The transit supported development, the concern I had early on with transit supported development is not the height so much, but how is that transit supported development paying for the transit that it is for people who are going to use that? How is it going to pay? And then finally, relating to the service changes. So now we have the public is going to be in late February, you're going to talk to the key stakeholders. And then in the beginning of March, the public, the regular general public will know. And the reason I bring this up is because you may remember back in June, you talked to folks in Ypsilanti, and the comment at the time was things went well. And then we had the July meeting, and that was lots of public comment. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. When I logged on to the RTA meeting, for some reason, the software created and made me the owner, and we couldn't figure out how to not make me the owner. So I just bring that up as a comment that the public is the owner of the Public Transit Authority. And to keep that in mind, and there are processes that we choose to process that, but I just bring that up. Thank you much, as always, for your time and attention.
Thank you. Keith, do we have anybody else?
Yes, Chairman Mahler, we have Ms. Michelle Barney. Ms. Barney, you've been unmuted.
I would like to know two things. I am not clear from what I heard about the meetings you're going to have in the fall with the public about listening to comments about new service and then commenting again. How is that going to be done? How will we be notified? Hello?
Yes, I think, Matt, do you want to field that, or do you want to get back to Ms. Barney with that?
Sure. And Michelle, thank you so much. It's nice to hear from you. We're going to have two streams of public involvement very shortly. One is for the restoration of normal service in August. The other is, I think that's what you were speaking about, starting to happen in March. We're going to push out the dates and times on our website, on social media. Normally, we would do it through print media as well, and we may do that as well. And we can certainly make it a point to give you a call as well, if that would help.
Yes, thank you. Also, Matt, you said something general about there's going to be money from the federal government. Have you been contacted? Is there anything more you can tell us? Have you been contacted by the Biden team? I'm a little concerned because although Biden has nominated Pete Buttigieg because he was a mayor to head a transportation group, he has very little experience with public transportation. So I'm wondering what you've heard from them, or maybe you can't say right now, but if you can, I'd like to hear more about that.
Mr.
Matt, go ahead.
Chair.
Yep, Matt, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Not President Biden's administration directly, but what happened is before he took office, Congress passed and President Trump signed a second relief bill. The first one a year ago was called the CARES Act. This one, I believe, is called CRISA. It's an unwieldy acronym. That one provided, I want to say, $900 million in relief. A portion of that was for public transit. It's flowing through established formulas. No, excuse me. CARES Act flowed through established formulas and was pretty clear pretty quickly. CRISA funding is already flowing through a new formula, and that's caused some confusion, and we've heard a range of numbers. We think we know the right number, but until we're certain about it, I don't want to tell everybody one number and then have to change it a week later. So that money's already coming, irregardless of Mr. Buttigieg's statements or potential confirmation. There could be additional things coming from the Biden administration, from Congress this year. There are several pieces of legislation that could be relevant. We're just, John's comments at the beginning of the meeting were focused on the CRISA legislation, which was passed 45 days ago.
I'm wondering about this new American Rescue proposal that Biden is going to put before Congress. Is there anything for transportation in that?
I did attend a APTA meeting this afternoon. It does sound like there could be some additional relief there, but that has a long way to go. And they have a new Congress.
Yes,
and
they certainly do.
I'm not going to count. I'm not going to count any eggs until they're hatched.
Okay. It would just seem that it would be consistent with Biden's climate statements to want to support mass transit. All right. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, do we have anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, we do not have anyone else at this time.
Okay, we'll close the public comment period and then move on to item 6.3, which is the closed session briefing. I don't know if our partners are prepared, but we can at least move to go into closed session here. If somebody would like to make a motion to take us into closed session, maybe Kyra?
Yes.
Second.
Motion to go into closed session pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act for strategy connected with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement.
And seconded by Sue. So we'll call the roll to go into closed session. If you support it, say yes. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So this suspends the regular board meeting and we will go into closed session. I think you were sent a link to the closed session from the staff earlier today. So if you don't have that link, please reach out to Keith Book for that. If not, and you have the link, then we'll see you in the closed session momentarily. Thank you, everybody. And you have to leave this meeting to go to the other. So thank you. Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yeah.
Brian?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. So that closes the meeting. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
I miss my gavel.